Hello dear students, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. Today is 2nd September 2024 and we have some important articles for today, and without any further delay let's get into the discussion. And yesterday I have given to you one prelims practice question. The question is the phenomenon of increasing concentration of a substance such as toxic chemical in the tissues of tolerant organisms at successively higher levels in a food chain is known as which of the following? The correct answer for this question is option C, biomagnification. So biomagnification actually means that the increasing concentration of a substance such as any toxic chemicals, in the tissues of organisms in the successive levels or higher levels, so that is known as biomagnification. The terms such as biomagnification, bioaccumulation we have discussed previously, and they are very important in the context of growing pollution of natural resources. And apart from biomagnification, bioaccumulation, bioremediation and bioprospecting are also phenomenon which are a very important phenomenon. Here bioremediation generally means using microorganisms to clean the pollutants, so that is a phenomenon known as bioremediation. And when we say a biomagnification, so bioprospecting, so in bioprospecting microorganisms are being used to extract important minerals from the rocks and other sources. That is known as bioprospecting. So however, as of now both bioprospecting and bioremediation are in the developmental stage. They are not fully they cannot be fully utilized as of now. They are still in the developmental phase. Research has been taking place on this bioprospecting and bioremediation. However, bioaccumulation and biomagnification are the phenomenon. So in bioaccumulation, the very same toxic chemicals accumulate over the subsequent tropic levels, from one tropic level to the another tropic level. And in biomagnification, the concentration of the very same toxic chemical would increase in the subsequent tropic levels, right? So you can clearly see how biomagnification would takes place over a period of time in one particular species, right? So over a period of time the toxic chemical concentration would increase over a period of time in the bioaccumulation. However, with respect to biomagnification, so both biomagnification and bioaccumulation would actually depend themselves on food chain and food web. So over the successive tropic levels, the concentration of toxic chemical would increase, and that would lead to the even extinction of species and threat to the existing biodiversity. So we will understand what is biomagnification. Biomagnification is the process by which toxic substances, specifically like pesticides and even pollutants, so they gradually increase their concentration as they move up the food chain. And this essentially means that the higher level predators such as birds, fish and marine mammals have more dangerous amounts of toxic material than the lower organisms, and that would over a period of time lead to the extinction of the species. Now in any tropic level or in any food chain, higher level or the lower level food chain, these different number of organisms are very important to maintain the ecosystem services. Extinction of the one species would lead to the extinction of other species in an ecosystem. So therefore it is very important that we need to protect and conserve natural resources from the pollution, from the problem of pollution. And today we have another prelims practice question, a very important prelims practice question. The question is, household consumption expenditure survey is an important tool for understanding the spending patterns of households in a country. So who is responsible for releasing household consumption expenditure survey in India? So the options are Reserve Bank of India, National Sample Survey of Office, and Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and Ministry of Finance. So try to answer this question in the comment section, because previously also we have discussed about this household consumption expenditure survey. So if you regularly follow our classes, you could answer this question. And the first article that we are going to start this discussion is with India's Neighborhood Watch, Past and Present. This was the article which is given in the Hindu newspaper. And India is located in the complex neighborhood, so therefore in this context it is very important that we need to look into India's neighbors and how India's policy has evolved over a period of time in a recent past, and how this policy is going to impact India's relations with all these neighbors in the future. Right, so we'll understand the context of this article. The context is that given the shifting dynamics in India's neighborhood, so it becomes very important to evaluate India's role and response to recent political upheavals in neighboring countries. So we have seen that when I say complex neighborhood, complex neighborhood now we have seen that in Maldives, the anti-India regime led by Mohammad Moiju come to power, and in Sri Lanka also, even though there was no anti-India government, but Sri Lanka has faced an economic crisis in recent times, and economic crisis is one of the key challenge that it has faced. And apart from the economic crisis it has faced, Sri Lanka has no political stability. 2 years back, no political stability, and there has been a growing Chinese presence and influence in the Sri Lanka. Okay, so Chinese influence or presence in Sri Lanka, so all these are a cause of concern for India specifically. And apart from that, if you talk about Bangladesh, and in Bangladesh also we have earlier Sheikh Hasina government, and there was a powerful anti quota protest that was started in Bangladesh, and these anti-quota protests over a period of time led to the anti-Sheikh Hasina regime protests, and that led to the Sheikh Hasina's resignation and Muhammad Yunus forming an interim government in Bangladesh. And in fact, when we talk about Sheikh Hasina is always acted or she is a pro-India, and she better protected India's interests in Bangladesh, whether it is with respect to militancy and India's investments in Bangladesh, India's connectivity projects to northeast part of India. So everything is very well ensured. But this interim government or even resignation of Sheikh Hasina, a blow for India. And in Afghanistan also, Taliban has came to power, and Taliban is a militant organization, and of course growing security threats for India in the Jammu and Kashmir region. Radicalization is another major challenge. And apart from Afghanistan, we should also talk about Pakistan. In Pakistan also, terrorism and militancy and lack of political stability, economic crisis, all these are challenges. And Myanmar, so in Myanmar there was a military junta is in power, and a frequent illegal immigration into Indian side is also another major problem. So therefore we could say that India is located in a complex neighborhood. So we'll understand the context of this, right? So historical successes of India. So what are the historical successes of India? So in 2008, India actually played a crucial role, a very important role in facilitating the democratic elections in Bangladesh. We all knew that India is the largest democracy in the world, and India always supports the democratic culture and democratic principles in any other country, especially India's neighborhood. But in 2008, so India played a very important role in facilitating democracy in Bangladesh, and that role of India in Bangladesh has led to Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh. So which Sheikh Hasina generally acted in favor of India, and she also strongly protected India's interests in Bangladesh. And during Sheikh Hasina's tenure, we could say that there was a blossom period of India-Bangladesh relations, right? So in fact, there were a number of connectivity projects that were launched from India to Bangladesh, to connecting northeastern part of India, because whenever we talk about the northeastern part of India, lack of connectivity is one of the main challenge to the northeastern part of India through Bangladesh. So we plan to ensure, because there was a rail link called Agartala Akhhaura rail link project, so to connect the northeastern part of India, right? So Mongla port connectivity project. So there were a number of connectivity projects to northeast, and our investments in Bangladesh are better protected. And in fact, India's support was very often considered as instrumental in Sri Lanka's post 2009 recovery, because LTTE essentially means Liberation of Tamil Tigers Elam, which has started a civil war in Sri Lanka for a separate Tamil country for the Tamils, an ethnic group who are living in Sri Lanka, because the Tamil ethnic group in Sri Lanka very often felt that they were discriminated and they were alienated. Their culture, their language not adequately prioritized. They were not given adequate representation in the political institutions, and because of this particular reason, a civil war was started in Sri Lanka in the year 1970s and 80s. And this civil war was led by a militant organization called Liberation of Tamil Tiger Elam. And this liberation of Tamil Tiger Elam and subsequent civil war in Sri Lanka has led to the political instability, economic crisis, and a lot of militant groups, a lot of militant groups which which have the safe shelters in Sri Lanka. But India has supported Sri Lanka. So after the LTTEs, after the end of LTTE, and India has actually provided an instrumental support to Sri Lanka in post 2019 recovery from the LTTE conflict, so thereby establishing a closer ties with the unified Sri Lanka. And India's support to the democratic transitions in Maldives in the year 2008, Myanmar in the year 2010, contributing to their political stability and even democratic maturations as well. However, we have been facing number of challenges in recent times, and the first and foremost challenge that we need to discuss is about Bangladesh. In 2014, last month, what happened in Bangladesh we have already seen, because Bangladesh has faced a political crisis, a political turmoil with the collapse of the Sheikh Hasina's government, right? So initially in Bangladesh, protests by the students were started as anti-quota protests, and over a period of time these anti-quota protests have turned into anti-Sheikh Hasina regime protests, and that would over a period of time lead to the resignation of Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh. And Sheikh Hasina's party is Awami League, and the Bangladesh Nationalist Party is the main opposition party in Bangladesh. And after the resignation of Sheikh Hasina, military has taken over, military rule was announced, and immediately after the military rule, an interim government was established in Bangladesh by the interim government was headed by Muhammad Yunus. So therefore, this regime change in Bangladesh has been revealing India's limited influence, and it has also been revealing failure to engage effectively with the opposition forces, right? So these are this is one challenge with respect to Bangladesh. And in fact, with respect to Sri Lanka, there was a severe economic crisis. We all knew about this severe economic crisis. And even the severe economic crisis in Sri Lanka even led to the president of Sri Lanka even fled the country, and there was a political turmoil 2 years back in the year 2022. So this political turmoil and economic crisis in Sri Lanka has highlighted India's essential role in providing emergency financial aid to countries like Sri Lanka, which is very close to India's neighborhood, and peace and stability in India's neighborhood is very, very important for overall regional rise of India as a superpower, and in fact maintaining diplomatic engagement amid the instability which was existing in Sri Lanka. However, the one problem that the experts have been pointing out, that India has very often misjudged the political shifts which took place in Maldives and Myanmar, and these political shifts which took place in both Myanmar and Maldives, leading to the diplomatic challenges and even necessitating a recalibration of India's foreign policy approaches, right? So in Maldives, the anti-India regime led by Mohammad Moiju came to power, and in Myanmar also there was a military junta which took control of the entire Myanmar. And apart from that, the Rakhine state conflict which led to the displacement of Rohingya Muslim minority communities out of Myanmar. So there are a number of challenges that these countries have been facing. Rather, there is a need for a policy change, a policy orientation towards India's neighbors. And in the light of India's neighborhood first policy, we all knew that the government of India has launched neighborhood first policy, right? So we have neighborhood first policy, and there is a need for a policy change with respect to India's neighbors, for a more proactive engagement with all the stakeholders and all the parties in India's neighborhood. That is the best policy, and that is the best way forward, because as of now, if you look at India's engagement with neighboring countries. India very often seems to engage with one single party in these respective countries. Now, before Afghanistan, India never engaged with the Taliban, but on the other hand, China regularly engages with all the parties in Afghanistan. And even in Maldives also, India never tried to engage with the opposition political parties, and over a period of time, these opposition political parties have started India Out campaign. Inspired from Maldives, Bangladesh also started India Out campaign by the opposition political parties. So therefore, India should engage with all relevant and concerned political parties and even all stakeholders in India's neighborhood, and that is very very important for India's close engagement with all these neighboring countries. And in this context, the author has suggested various strategies and recommendations for India's proactive engagement with its neighbors. So in this context, the author has held that India needs to engage more dynamically with Bangladesh and Myanmar, right? So we need to engage more dynamically with Bangladesh and Myanmar, which are very very important players for firstly India's Act East policy. So we have Act East policy, and apart from Act East policy with respect to northeast connectivity, both Myanmar and Bangladesh are very very important. So therefore, India needs to engage more dynamically, taking into consideration the current political realities. India needs to engage more dynamically with these parties, and balancing its supports between democratic forces and strategic interests to stabilize the region is very very important. So we need to look for the ensuring stability, peace in the region. So India's developmental projects across the region, which includes Afghanistan. Okay, so Afghanistan is a very very important player in India's neighborhood, because in Afghanistan itself we have launched a number of developmental projects. Okay, so for example, Delaram highway project that was launched, Delaram highway project that we have launched in Afghanistan. And apart from Delaram highway, and Friendship Dam was also constructed. In Afghanistan, and even Parliament building was also constructed, and Children's Hospital, a number of high impact community development projects were also constructed, right? So in Afghanistan, so therefore it is not just limited to Afghanistan, rather number of countries we have launched such developmental projects in number of other countries as well. So therefore it actually demonstrating India's overall commitment in fostering goodwill and even the stability as well, because India has a stakes in ensuring goodwill and stability in these respective countries. And in order to ensure goodwill and stability in these respective countries, it is very very important that we have to make sure that these political upheavals or political instability does not prevail too long, because that would threaten India's overall developmental or investments in these respective countries. And India should employ strategic patience and even enhance the diplomatic efforts to navigate the complex political landscapes of its neighbors while protecting its interests, even promoting the regional stability as well, right? So we have a complex neighborhood, there's no doubt about that. So in this context, we need to ensure a strategic patience. So we need to have a strategic patience, and that would enhance diplomatic efforts to navigate the complex or diplomatic efforts to navigate the complex political landscapes of these neighbors while protecting its interests and even promoting regional stability as well. So next important article is about Dongaria Kund's tribal children's school is in Uphill, right? So Dongaria Kund is one of the tribal community, so which is known as PVTG, particularly vulnerable tribal group, which lives in Odisha. Now PVTGs is a very important topic because UPSC has already asked about the PVTGs in preliminary examination. So from the mains perspective also, this particularly vulnerable tribal group are one of the most important tribal group, right? So Dongaria Kond tribal children's school is in Uphill, because when we talk about the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, they live in remote rural areas, and they lack connectivity. Proper connectivity is a main challenge, and primitive agriculture and primitive and even subsistent form of agriculture that they actually practice. Okay, so primitive form of agriculture that they regularly practice, and apart from primitive agriculture, lack of connectivity is another major challenge. And apart from that, we should also talk about a lack of adequate healthcare and even education facilities. Healthcare and education facilities is another major challenge that these people have been facing, right? So in this context, education in this Dongaria Kond tribal group in the state of Odisha has been facing a number of challenges because of various existing factors. So we will discuss about that in a very detailed manner. So generations of this Dongaria Kond tribals in Odisha Raigad district have not been to school. They have not been to school because of the challenges of living in a hilly area in the forest. So as I have already told you that most of these tribal people live in a difficult hilly difficult terrain, and since they live in a hilly difficult terrain, it would be very difficult or uphill task for them to regularly attend the school. And the concentration of the schools in these Dongaria Kond tribal regions is also very scarce, and poor roads and parental work, day of school proximity, and even boarding school problems all impact children's right to education. So that is one of the major problem, because these tribal areas, since they live in remote rural areas, poor roads, parental work, and day school proximity, and boarding school problems all impact children's right to education. We all knew that article 21A of the Indian Constitution provides for a fundamental right. So therefore, when children are not attending schools, of course it impacts their article 21A of the Indian Constitution. Okay, so Dongaria Kond tribe is one of the 13 particularly vulnerable tribal groups in Odisha. Okay, so it is a particularly vulnerable tribal group. Now when we talk about the particularly vulnerable tribal groups in the state of Odisha, there are around 13 particularly vulnerable tribal groups in the state of Odisha, and Odisha is the state with the highest number of particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So Dongaria Kond derive their name from Dongar, which means agricultural land on the hill slopes. Okay, so this is the meaning of Dongaria, and they have named themselves as Jernia, which essentially means the protector of streams, right? So they are protector of the streams, and their language is Kui language. So this is what the language is. And when we talk about the major festivals of Dongaria Kond tribal group, so Maria, Naukai were the major festivals that they usually celebrate, and the community is also organized into many clans, with each owing their allegiance to the Kond Pradhan, right? So many clans, and the head of this clan in Dongaria Kond tribal group is Kond Pradhan, and they fought to save the ecology of Niyamgiri hill range from bauxite mining operation in the year 2014 to 2013 in the state of Odisha, right? So you just remember that Niyamgiri tribal range, which is known for bauxite mining, and they have protected the ecology of this Niyamgiri hill range from the bauxite mining operations from 2004 to 2013. And in fact, there's a data on the education and even empowerment of people in the Dongaria Kond particularly vulnerable tribal group people, and data from the project appraisal and even budgeting, achievements, and data handling system, which is known as Prabandh. And in fact, this Prabandh is a new central government scheme for school education interventions, and this particular data from the Prabandh actually shows that there are only 44 high schools that essentially cater to the district's tribal and Dalit populations, and therefore there is a need for a more number of schools in this Dongaria Kond tribal villages, so that more and more people will have access to education. And in fact, as I have already told you, that Dongaria Konds are categorized by the central government as particularly vulnerable tribal groups for their distinct lifestyle, isolated habitation, and weak economic status. right? So there are number of other factors also which actually or usually determine any group as a particularly vulnerable tribal group because of the primitive nature of agriculture and in fact lower levels of literacy and declining population of that particular tribal group, so or lower levels of population. So all these factors determine any tribal group as a particular vulnerable tribal group. As I've already told you that Odisha is the state with the largest or highest number of particularly vulnerable tribal groups, and in fact the Dongaria Kond tribal people are mainly shifting cultivators. So we all knew that most of the tribal people practice the shifting cultivation, and Dongaria Kond also practice shifting cultivation. And in fact, the government of India launched after independence launched various 5-year plans. During the fifth 5-year plan, so that was from 1974 to 1978, the Union government had an intervention plan. That intervention plan aimed at uplifting the particularly vulnerable tribal group and even mainstreaming these PVTGs as well. And we need to talk about the particularly vulnerable tribal group, Dongaria Kond, and their life in these forests. So female literacy rate in this Dongaria Kond tribal community is around 6.67. However, the sex ratio is a healthy at 1349. So sex ratio is one of the key factor, because if you look at many Indian states, the sex ratio is very low. But it is one of the positive factor that the sex ratio, I mean sex ratio in the sense that for every 1000 males there is 1349 females, and children aged about 10 years, they generally carry out household chores, caring babies, keeping the hut clean, and even collecting water. So these are some of the basic functions they used to perform. And there's an agency called Dongaria Kond Development Agency, and that is in the Kurli Panchayat headquarters, and in fact it was launched in the year 1978 and 79. And over the last 46 years, this Dongaria Kond tribal agency Kurli has been focused on only 7,000 odd Dongaria Konds distributed in 1,650 households in 64 villages, right? So as of now, there were around 7,000 odd Dongaria Konds which were distributed around 1,650 households in 64 villages in Odisha. The literacy rate among Dongaria Kond was under the Dongaria Kond Developmental Agency Kurli was abysmally low at just 7.40%, and female literacy is 6.67%. So therefore there is a need for interventions in the area of education and improving literacy rate of Dongaria Konds. There are certain unique challenges that they have been facing. So these unique challenges include struggle to grasp what teachers teach in classrooms due to language barriers that they have been facing, and even bilingual dictionaries and multilingual education programs have helped ease these difficulties in some areas, but the challenges still remain because these bilingual dictionaries and multilingual education programs are not available across all areas of this Dongaria Kond tribal communities. There's also lack of physical infrastructure improvement like building schools, playgrounds, roads, which are very important and essential. So these physical infrastructure improvements are lacking, and innovative methods including offering education at flexible times. And Odisha Economic Survey 23-24 actually highlights a significant amount of dropout rate among the tribal children, with more than 30% leaving schools before the completion. And the government has also introduced a new scheme called Madho Singh Hath Kharcha. So this initiative, every tribal student who passes class 8 and 10 and even enrolls in class 9 and 11 will receive an annual amount of 5,000 rupees, and this scheme is expected to benefit around 3 lakh tribal students as per the government, right? So this is all about the Dongaria Kond tribal community. Okay. Sorry. So next article is policies and initiatives regarding the LGBTQI plus community, right? So LGBTQ I plus community is one of the vulnerable community, and in recent times, so we have seen that LGBTQI plus community have filed a petition in the Supreme Court regarding their legal rights, and in this context the government has also initiated a number of measures and the number of programs for the development and for the benefit of LGBTQI plus communities. And in fact, the government has also issued guidelines for the welfare and the development, and to specifically prohibit discrimination of this LGBTQI plus community, right? The Department of Social Justice and Empowerment, so which is also known as Department of Social Justice and Empowerment, has invited inputs from various stakeholders and even public at large, so as to ensure that policies and initiatives regarding LGBTQI plus community are inclusive and effective. A host of measures have been taken, Government of India, regarding the LGBTQI plus community, and this is what we have discussed in the beginning of this topic. And in fact, the government has issues regarding issue of ration cards to the LGBTQI plus communities, enabling individuals belonging to this queer community to have a joint bank account with the option to name the partner as nominee, and harassment on account of the gender identity and sexual orientation. So regarding these specific issues, the government has issued certain regulations and certain guidelines for the protection of interests of the LGBTQI plus communities, and it was also decided that a subcommittee be set up to further discuss and even finalize the issues which are particularly pertaining to the LGBTQI plus community, and those issues included providing ration cards to the LGBTQI plus communities, and even providing bank accounts with the nominee as the spouse of this LGBTQI plus community, and even jail visitation requests, law and order measures to ensure that this queer community will not face or may not face any threat of violence, harassment, coercion, or any other form of discrimination. So this is what the government has certainly held about the LGBTQI plus community and their dignified life. Remember Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, which specifically talks about right to life and personal liberty. Right to life and personal liberty. So this right to life and personal liberty also protects the life. It is also talks about the right to live with dignity. Right to live with dignity, right? So it is also very important that the LGBTQI plus community should also live a life of dignity. However, the government of India has already taken the following interim action regarding the LGBTQI plus community. Now we will understand what are those measures, what is that interim action that the government of India has already undertaken for the welfare and benefit of this LGBTQI plus community. So enabling partners in the queer relationship are to be treated as part of the same household for the purpose of ration card, right? So ration card would be issued for the people of LGBTQ plus community, and in fact enabling the partners of this queer relationship are to be treated as a part of the same household. Imagine that two individuals from the LGBTQI plus community are married. So even though there is no legal recognition for the marriage of the LGBTQI plus individuals, so if they are living together, they can be considered as a household and they will be issued a ration card. And in fact, the union government has also asked the states and union territories to take all necessary measures to ensure that the partners in the queer relationship are not subjected to any discrimination in the issuance of the ration cards. So this is what the union government has asked to all the respective state governments and union territories, and there should be no restrictions for the purposes of the queer community to open a joint bank account and also to nominate a person in queer relationship as a nominee to receive balance in the account. So in fact, now as I've already told you that when two individuals who belong to the LGBTQI plus community, when they married, they will not be recognized as a family, because there's no legal recognition for the marriage of this LGBTQI plus community. So however, central government has taken an interim action. So under this interim action, so if they are living together, they can be considered as a household and they can be issued a ration card. And central government has also asked all state governments and union territories to issue a ration card in this regard. And also the central government has also asked that, so they can be asked all the financial institutions that they can open a bank account, and in fact one of the individual in this community, in this household, can nominate the other individual of the LGBTQI plus category as a nominee, right? So as a person in queer relationship, as a nominee to receive the balance in the account, so in the event of the death of an account holder. So there are measures to ensure rights of this LGBTQI plus community with relation to health care, planning awareness activities, and prohibition of conversion therapy, and availability of sex reassignment surgery, and changes in curricula for provision of teleconsultation, sensitization, and training at various levels of staff. So therefore, over a period of time, so it ensures that they would live a life of dignity, and it also ensures Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, more and more sensitization of the people towards the LGBTQI plus community, so that they can live a dignified life. Okay, so this is what in this article, and we'll discuss the next important article, which is about the judicial appointments in India through the collegium system. And the author has been talking about the flaws in the judicial appointments through the collegium system, and the author has also pointed out the need for reviving National Judicial Appointments Commission, so which was brought into the existence through 99th constitutional amendment. However, the Supreme Court has declared that this 99th constitutional amendment act is unconstitutional because it violates the judicial independence, and judicial independence is part of the basic structure doctrine. And in this context, we will understand what the author has been trying to suggest with respect to the reforming the process of judicial appointments. How can we make the process of judicial appointments more and more transparent and accountable? The problem of appointing judges, which is essentially linked to the problem of pendency of cases. So there's a huge judicial vacancy in India, there is no doubt about that. From the higher judiciary to the lower judiciary, there's a huge vacancy of judges. And apart from the huge vacancy of judges across different levels of the judiciary, there is also a huge problem of pendency of cases, and that has always been a matter of debate in India. However, there are delays in the appointment are often caused by a standoff between the executive and the judiciary, right? So there's a standoff between there's a delays in the appointment are often caused by the standoff between executive and judiciary. So that is specifically because of the existing collegium system. Okay, and apart from these things, so according to the author, so in April 16 lakh cases remained pending across different high courts, and even 30% of the seats remained vacant even at different levels of the judiciary. So according to a report which was published by Department of Justice under Ministry of Justice. Okay, so you can imagine that the pending number of cases across various high courts, and even the number of seats vacant at the different levels of the judiciary. And this problem of pendency of cases and vacancy at the different levels of the judiciary further exacerbated when the Supreme Court has struck down the 99th Constitutional Amendment Act, which was National Judicial Appointments Commission, as unconstitutional. And this National Judicial Appointments Commission which actually sought to give politicians, civil society a final say in the appointment of judges to the highest court, right? So in fact it was considered as one of the inclusive process of appointing judges to the higher judiciary, but due to the reason that the National Judicial Appointments Commission would encroach upon the independence of the judiciary, the Supreme Court has actually declared it as unconstitutional, right? So in fact the collegium system, which is in place and which was evolved through number of judgments, the collegium system has been frequently criticized for its lack of accountability and transparency, and even now also judges are being appointed by the judges, right? So this procedure of judges being appointed by the judges under the collegium system is excessively criticized because it has been it may favor nepotism, or it may lead to the favoritism within the appointment of the judges, and that would over a period of time will lead to the compromising objectivity and efficiency and competency of the judiciary. And in fact a lot of legal experts and even former judges also, they have supported this National Judicial Appointments Commission as an inclusive process or procedure to appoint judges, right? So in fact Parliament in its wisdom has enacted this National Judicial Appointments Commission Act, and this proposed body would have replaced the collegium system. So since the higher judiciary has declared that this National Judicial Appointments Commission is illegal, so unconstitutional, and therefore the collegium system still prevails with respect to appointment of the judges. However, this collegium system is criticized a lot because of its lack of accountability and transparency, and in fact the judiciary has contended that the National Judicial Appointments Commission would give the government excessive control over the selection of judges, and that would lead to the compromising independence of the judiciary or undermining its independence. And because of that reason, the Supreme Court has declared National Judicial Appointments Commission as unconstitutional. And in fact the court has also held that the National Judicial Appointments Commission may jeopardize the impartiality and even objectivity of the appointment process, and that would further endanger the judicial independence. And in fact we all knew that Supreme Court of India is known as the custodian of the Constitution, and in this context it is very important to protect the judicial independence, particularly the independence of the Supreme Court, right? So because of this particular reason, the Supreme Court has declared that NJAC would be unconstitutional because it would attract more and more government involvement and interference in the appointment of the judges. And if appointment of the judges have to take place faster, so we need to bring back the National Judicial Appointments Commission. So that was the view of the author. We need to bring back the National Judicial Appointments Commission if we wanted to make the appointment of the judges faster, and if we wanted to resolve the cases which are pending. So prior to any plan being finalized, all relevant parties, and these parties including judiciary, legislature, civil society and bar association, should be consulted, so before bringing a reformed National Judicial Appointments Commission. So it should be a multi-stakeholder consulted process, and we need to take consensus of all relevant parties before bringing in the reformed National Judicial Appointments Commission. So in this context, the author has also been saying that there is a need for learning lessons from other countries also with respect to the appointment of the judges. And in fact, in the view of author, there are many countries which actually switched on to appointments commission system, right? So like how we use how the Parliament has brought in National Judicial Appointments Commission. So in number of other countries, UK, France and South Africa, there were number of countries which actually switched on to the Appointments Commission system for the appointment of the judges. So South Africa has a Judicial Service Commission, and that Judicial Service Commission advises the President to appoint judges. And secondly, Constitutional Reform Act 2005 introduced by the UK, so which established two commissions for the purpose of choosing candidates, right? So these are the two examples that the author has provided, which indicating that these countries have switched over to the appointments commission system, that India can also do so. And these models would actually provide a space to the members of the judiciary, legal academia, politicians, and lay persons. Our progressive appointment system, and India could take lessons from them. And in fact, these are more inclusive and coherent appointing systems. But in India, judges are being appointed by the judges through the collegium system, which is being criticized. Rather, we need a more inclusive process. We need to provide a space for other members of the legislature, legal academia, and politicians, which ensures that the judges are not just being appointed by the judges, right? So in this context, the author has suggested that there is a need for reworking National Judicial Appointments Commission. The National Judicial Appointments Commission, in author's view, was an elegant reform, and it could have resulted in the faster nominations of judges because of its democratic structure. In its present form, the collegium system, which is appointment of the judges by the judges, under which the Chief Justice, along with two or senior most Supreme Court judges, recommend appointments and even transfers, and which is considered as opaque. That essentially means it lacks transparency and accountability. And under this collegium system, no one knows what is the criteria to select the judges. And in fact, the system also offers room for favoritism, which could further prevent competent and even deserving judges from being appointed into the higher judiciary. So that would lead to the compromising of the competence of the higher judiciary. So despite its supposed faults, the National Judicial Appointments Commission can be reworked by taking into account the views of the judiciary, the executive, and the civil society, and the need to strike a balance between judicial independence and even the accountability as well. So this is what the author has been suggesting. So however, through this image you can see how the collegium system has evolved over a period of time, right? So post 1993, so judiciary has assumed the primacy by creating collegiums in the Supreme Court and even high courts. And collegiums in the Supreme Court and high courts actually decide the appointment of the judges and also the transfer of the judges, right? So you can go through this image. And today we have one important mains practice question, and in fact this was the previous year question. The question was, the Supreme Court of India keeps a check on the arbitrary power of Parliament in amending the constitution. And this question particularly talking about the Keshwananda Bharati judgment, and which has come up with the basic structure doctrine. And this basic structure doctrine essentially consists of few important provisions of the constitution, such as rule of law, free and fair elections, independence of the judiciary, secularism, federalism, and democratic nature of Indian polity and parliamentary form of government. So everything is part of the basic structure doctrine. And Parliament can amend any part of the constitution, but it cannot violate the basic structure doctrine which is given in the Keshwananda Bharati judgment, right? So what is the approach of this particular question? The approach is that you need to introduce with Article 368, amending power of the Parliament, and then you the second part of the question, you need to write how Supreme Court keeps a check on the amending power of the Parliament. And third, you need to write the criticism of the basic structure doctrine. And fourth, conclude the answer by mentioning important role played by the Supreme Court in protecting constitution from the arbitrary amendments. Right, so this is how you need to write the approach of this particular question. So we'll try to look into these different parts of the question. So first, you need to introduce with Article 368, amending power of the Parliament. So Article 368, Part 20 of the Indian Constitution specifically deals with the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution and its procedure. And in fact, Article 368, Part 20 of the Indian Constitution states that the Parliament may amend the Constitution by way of addition, variation, or repeal of any provision in accordance with the procedures which are being laid down for this particular purpose. Now, the second part of the question is that how Supreme Court keeps a check on the amending power of the Parliament. So in Keshwananda Bharati judgment of 1973, so in this particular case, the Supreme Court has overruled its judgment in the Golaknath case. So in the Golaknath case, in fact, the Supreme Court has held that a Parliament has the power of the parliament to amend the constitution was restricted in the Golaknath case. So in this case, in Keshwanand Bharati case, Supreme Court has overruled the judgment in the Golaknath case, and in fact, the Supreme Court has upheld the validity of the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act. And in fact, the Supreme Court has also stated that Parliament is empowered to abridge or take away any of the fundamental rights. But in fact, in Golaknath case, it has imposed certain restrictions on the Parliament to amend the fundamental rights and other parts of the Indian Constitution. So at the same time, the Keshwanand Bharati judgment has also laid down a doctrine of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. So as I have already told you that the rule of law is part of the basic structure doctrine, and the parliamentary form of government is also part of the basic structure doctrine. Parliamentary form of government and free and fair elections is also part of the basic structure doctrine. So there are a number of such features which are included in the basic structure doctrine. So in fact, it ruled that the constituent power of the parliament under Article 368 so does not enable it to alter the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. So this essentially means that Parliament cannot abridge or take away the fundamental rights that forms part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. So in Minerva Mills versus Union of India judgment, right, so in this particular Minerva Mills case, the Supreme Court has held that the Indian Constitution is founded on the bedrock of balance between fundamental rights and directive principles. So this particular Minerva Mills judgment talks about the harmony between the fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy, right? So if any a law is being passed by the parliament, or if any constitutional amendment is brought by the union parliament to implement the directive principles of state policy which comes in conflict with the fundamental rights, then so that law would be valid and that would not be declared as unconstitutional, and this is what the Supreme Court has actually held. And in fact, so this is also comes under the check on the arbitrary power of the parliament to amend the constitution. And in fact, the Supreme Court in the Minerva Mills versus Union of India case held that the parliament can amend fundamental rights for implementing the directive principles so long as the amendment does not damage or destroy the basic structure of the constitution. So there is a criticism of the basic structure doctrine as well. Now what is this criticism? So it essentially talks about safeguarding the constitutional integrity. However, it is essential to recognize the limits of this doctrine, and in fact, while it serves as a guardian of the Indian constitutional integrity, it should not be employed to contest regular legislation which would potentially undermine a very foundations of the constitution itself. So this is another criticism. And in fact, the potential dangers applying the basic structure theory to assess the constitutionality of ordinary legislation might well be akin to destructive force, and it would even jeopardize the fundamental structure of our constitution. And even so, this basic structure doctrine, or even Supreme Court's power to check the arbitrary power of the parliament, must be judiciously and precisely exercised to maintain the delicate balance of our constitutional system. And in fact, so we should talk about the basic structure being criticized as it does not have any statutory status, and it does not have even it is nowhere mentioned in the constitution. And in fact, the Supreme Court has not clearly defined what constitutes basic structure doctrine. Rather, over a period of time, the Supreme Court has been including certain features within the basic structure doctrine, right? Ultimately, you need to conclude the answer by mentioning important role played by the Supreme Court in protecting constitution from the arbitrary amendments. The Supreme Court has a crucial role in maintaining the sanctity of the constitution. And in fact, the Supreme Court ensures that the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution is not used arbitrarily to alter the basic structure of the Constitution. So one such example is in the Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Narayan case of 1975. The Supreme Court has declared Clause 4, Article 329A, added by the 39th Amendment, as unconstitutional and void on the ground that It was beyond the parliament's amending power, as it destroys the basic feature of the constitution. And other example is 99th Constitutional Amendment Act was also declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court because it encroaches upon the independence of the judiciary. Hence, judiciary plays a very important role in protecting constitution and also ensures constitutionalism. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.